welcome to our new episode of Chaps Chat with me, Don.
Me, Ollie.
And today we've got a new guest, Giorgia. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me here. I'm
Yeah.
very pleased to be here.
Yeah, how are you doing today anyway?
I'm okay, thank you.
Good, fantastic. So yeah, it's really great to have you here. I think obviously from our conversations we've had already, definitely got some relevant experience for, I guess, the type of viewers that we have and obviously the message we're trying to get out there. But I guess initially it'd be good to get a bit of an understanding on your overall experience in regards to mental health, just to give, I guess, people watching a bit of a wide basis and an idea of what you've done personally.
Sure, so I guess I'll talk a little bit about my background. So I'm 25 now. I moved to London when I was 19,
Okay.
and I came here to study neuroscience. Obviously, in Italy, we have different courses that are not as specific. So I really was interested in getting to know the mind and how the brain works. And so, yeah, I did my BSc in neuroscience, and there obviously I studied chemical and anatomical aspects of the brain.
Okay.
And then toward the end, I studied also neurodegenerative and neurodevelopmental disorders. So there I got really interested about how this play out within the mind in terms of the chemical balances and also in life, really, how they affect people. So then I moved on to doing my master's in early intervention in psychosis, and there obviously I studied psychosis specifically. And there I had the opportunity to talk with some service users, and they were telling me about how impactful it was for them to work with mental health professionals and how much they helped them in their recovery. So there I realized, okay, maybe I want to go into that. So at first I was working in a lab, I was doing more research, and then through that experience I realized I wanted to work one-on-one with people. So then I went on and did my postgraduate diploma in mental health practice, and there basically I was going some days to uni, and some days I was working with the NHS. So I was doing a training, but also I was employed effectively by the NHS. And yeah, so when I was there, I kind of experienced two main settings. So I worked in a crisis and home treatment resolution team. So that's basically an acute setting, so where you help people in acute stages of their disorders. So, for example, if they have psychotic episode, or a relapse in the presentation, or if they're attempted suicide, for example.
Okay.
And then the other setting in which I worked in was IAP service, which basically is improving access to psychological.
Is that like talking therapies?
Yes.
So me and Ollie, you was talking therapies you went through as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've both been through ourselves, so got some first-hand experience on that one. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, in the past, I also referred myself
Yeah.
when I first came here. Yeah, because obviously I was alone. I was so young, and I was I've always been very anxious myself. So I've also had that experience. So it's been interesting to see, both as a service user, let's say, and also working there, how it works.
And did that help, I guess, you, as you had knowledge in that area, I can imagine, because I think one of the things that helped me most from therapy was CBT and just learning how the mind works. But for me, that wasn't knowledge I had before. So I think people would be better suited to deal with those issues if they were aware of that. So did that, I guess, do you think that kind of enabled you, I guess, to see better success in trying to help that side of things quicker, or?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've seen it on myself. Obviously, I've done talking therapies before, and I've seen the effect that they had on me. So obviously that also motivated me to go down the route, because I think it's very powerful. To be honest, I've always done talking therapies in terms of the more regular way. So meeting with a psychologist and talking about your experiences. I haven't done CBT myself, but I studied it a lot with my studies, and that's actually the route that I would like to go down to. Later on, I would like to train in that type of therapy specifically, because what I've seen is usually with regular talking therapy, it can take a long time. Sometimes, you always talk about the traumas and the past, and it could be quite triggering. And whereas with CBT is faster, it has high effects rates as well. and is really structured in the way that it works.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of a newer technique, and I think it's worth exploring. That's what I would recommend to someone that needs help, for example, with mild to moderate anxiety or depression.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think CBT was made for the anxiety route as well, I think, because of the structure that they have it in. It's a plan. Obviously, with anxiety, it's like you like things to be in place already for you, so you haven't got to worry about it too much. So I think the techniques that they use are very good. But when you're saying about just the normal talking therapies with like a counsellor and things, I think it's all suited to people's preference, really, isn't it? So if you know, a lot of people just have therapy sessions with their counsellor on a weekly basis just to get stuff off their chest. To talk to their counsellor about, you know, am I making the right moves in life? You know, do you think I'm doing well here? And like, is this what I should be doing, or my relationship? So I think, you know, going down the private route of a counsellor is where you can have them conversations. But yeah, CBT is great because it mainly focuses on a program for you to relax your mind.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I still do, I still see a psychologist. I always do, because the way I see mental health, I think it's, you know, it gives you a tool. Like, everybody needs it. You don't have to be facing a huge crisis in your life necessarily to reach out. Like, I've always done therapy, and I'm still going down the more conventional route. So I agree with everything you're saying. With CBT, I guess it can be helpful if the person wants to know, get to know specific tools and how they can apply them in their day-to-day life,
100%.
rather than just having a space to kind of decompress and vent and talk about.
Yeah, definitely. Like techniques, that's what I learned in CBT. I think like 5 things you can see, touch, hear, like to calm the brain, and breathing exercises and all them things. Yeah, but I think the counselling route I wouldn't mind going down as well. Sometimes I need to vent a little things that don't really relate to that.
I love to talk anyway, to be honest with you. So I think what something that caught my eye that you said there was how that even that you see a psychologist just, I guess, in a general sense, which I believe is probably the best thing for everyone, just in a sense, because we're in our minds. Well, our minds are going constantly, so there's obviously a lot of circumstances where you may experience something you don't understand with your mind. But I feel like, compared to other countries, and I say this because we spoke to someone who owns a counselling company in the US, and he said the same thing, that there it's very much less taboo, and it's more people, if they're not suffering for like a bad issue with mental health, they'll just see a psychologist or a counsellor generally anyway. Where I feel like, as in the UK, it's only really when people are like suffering very, very badly that they'll actually go and reach out. And I just wanted to ask if you felt that as well, or if you'd felt something different from that.
Yeah, I'd say, thinking about maybe when I was working in the IEP service, so I would have people, most of the time they were self-referring themselves because of obviously issues that they were having, and most of the time it was when they got to that kind of breaking point in which they tried everything else, or like, meaning that just like relaxation, mindfulness, and they saw that it didn't work. Really rarely I would speak with someone that were just willing to, you know, get that help. But I also feel like most people would think, oh, I wouldn't be taken seriously. You know, like the biggest feedback that I would get when I was talking with clients would be that, I don't know if you guys are gonna go along and give me that support, because there are so many people that are feeling so much worse than me. There are people that are attempting suicide, and I'm not at that stage. I'm just a bit depressed or a bit anxious. So I think they have this kind of idea that they need to reach that point to be taken seriously, otherwise, you know.
I think that's a big thing as well with mental health, is assumptions. I know, like with anxiety, you make so many assumptions, and it's like realistic. Well, none of them. Most of the time, none of them are realistic at all. And it's like you're playing out a scenario that hasn't even happened in your own mind. And I think that links into what you just said there, because I'm sure we'll get into it later in the pod. But there's so much stigma, and I think that's obviously builds that kind of, I guess, wall in between someone taking that step. Again, links into why we do this, just because obviously we're all everyday people, and we want to show that there are people out there that are kind of taking that step, and that it's okay for everyone else too. But yeah, I know on that side of things, for me with anxiety, making assumptions was probably one of the worst ones, the worst symptoms I had. But I think CBT does really help with that, because I think you get a lot. What CBT does is explain a lot of maybe feelings that you get and that you're resonating with your mental health that maybe not are not related to your mental health. Like maybe because I used to get like what I thought was bad heart palpitations and it increased heart rate, increased heartbeat in scenarios, and I would maybe like resonate that with mental health when it wasn't really to do with that. So I mean, from CBT itself, what would you say was the most, I guess, impactful thing that you've seen with the people that you've worked with?
In CBT in general, I think like a real breakthrough when people understand that everything is connected. So it's like a pyramid where you have thoughts at the top, and then you have behaviors and emotion, and it's really the idea of changing the thought, reformulating the thought, that leads to a change in affect, so that your emotions and your behaviors. So even just, at the beginning you would do some psychoeducation to explain to people how it works, and you can already see that kind of the cogs are turning.
Yeah.
So it's really empowering for them also to know, when you do kind of the timeline of your life. So you write down since kind of childhood to adolescence and adulthood. You break down everything that happened to you, and that really helps with the stigma as well, because mostly when the people come into the service, they might feel broken, they confused, they don't understand what is wrong with them. And when you kind of do the breakdown and you show, okay, but this thing happened to you, maybe you had this trauma, and then you went through this stressful situation in your life, and you do this work with them, that really makes them realize, oh, okay, so I'm not damaged, I'm not wrong. It makes sense that all of these different situations have brought these kind of feelings that I'm experiencing now. So that's really powerful. Also to break down the stigma, because people do start to feel like, they judge themselves less in a way, which they shouldn't in the first place, obviously. And then even using experiments and things like that you would do with CBT, especially with people with psychosis, is very powerful, because CBT is actually recommended by NICE guidelines for to treat the psychotic symptoms like delusions, for example.
Okay.
So it's really powerful to see how it plays out, because so delusions are fixed beliefs that somebody holds that are obviously they're wrong, they're not true, but the person is convinced that
They're
that
right,
belief,
yeah.
that is true. So they're really unshakable, and it's very hard to change. But with CBT, what you would do is that you would write down the belief and then rate the conviction rate. So how convinced I am that this is true, and let's say they would say 90%. And then you kind of write down, okay, what is the evidence for this belief? Why do I think I'm right? And what is the evidence against? And then you rate it again, and you can see there is a change there, and people start to be like, oh, actually, now that I've looked at the evidence against, oh, maybe actually it's not, maybe I'm not right. So there is some wiggle room, and they rate it, let's say they go down from 100% conviction to 50%. So that's also very powerful to see, especially with people with psychosis, that obviously is a more complex presentation.
Sure. And just to ask, like, what I could imagine it's an array of things. It's probably based on those people's lives and their backgrounds. But is there anything like prevalent that makes, I guess, people ripe to be able to be in that delusional state? Because obviously, being in, let's say, in the mindset I'm in now, it's such a big gap between that and believing something that's not logical, or something that before we may have known not to be true, and then being so wholehearted in believing that's true. So is there any, like, I guess, prevalent backgrounds or anything prevalent in what people have experienced that can put them in that mindset?
You mean in terms of like kind of risk factors that make you
in the sense of, to get to that, so if I was to believe something that at one point in time I knew wasn't true, but obviously if I'd gone through psychosis and now I'm delusional and I believe that, I'm saying, is there anything in people's backgrounds that tends to bring on that state, like that you see like across the board, like a trend that would bring that, I guess, type of psychosis on? Because I think it's quite hard for people to see how someone could get from one point to then to be delusional about something.
It's a range of things. Obviously, so in terms of the delusion per se, it starts from, let's say, chemically in the brain. We have, with psychosis in general, there are many theories, but one of the most prominent one is about the increased dopaminergic transmission. So basically, they would have something needs to happen. So if you go through a trauma in life, so let's say adverse childhood experiences that make you predisposed, and then you go on with your life, and then later on in early adulthood you experience another trauma or any other thing that could be a trigger, even a breakup. It doesn't have to be something too huge that can kind of set you off, and then that stress can lead to dopamine sensitization. So basically you have this increased release in dopamine, and usually dopamine is really like the reward neurotransmitter. So basically what it does is that it drives behavior, because when you're doing something pleasurable, then it would be released, and so it gives you reward, and then you want to do it more and more again. And with psychosis, you get a sensitization of that system. So basically, there is a lot more dopaminergic transmission, but this basically leads to drive importance to things that you usually wouldn't have thought about before. So it's a bit complicated, but it's the concept of aberrant salience. So basically, let's say when this happens, you start to give a different meaning to everything that happens around you. So in the prodromal stage, which is the stage just before getting the episode of psychosis and becoming delusional, basically the people start seeing the world with through totally different lenses. Everything changes. So every stimulus, you just interpret it in a different way, and it gains much more importance. So for example, a good example of this could be ideas of reference, which is a type of the delusion where the person, let's say, hears something on the radio, where obviously they're just talking about something generic, and they think, oh, this is a special message that's directed at me. Or they see something in an advert, and they're like, oh, okay, they made this advert for me. So because of this increased dopamine being released, you kind of see the stimulus, and it looks more important that
more personal to you.
Yeah,
they take it more personal.
Usually you wouldn't have thought of that, you know?
Yeah, anyone who's not going through that would just see that as an advert or a radio.
Yeah, you don't even think about it, yeah.
Yeah, that's sad really, isn't it, when you think about it? But that's a very powerful thing that can happen in your mind. Getting to that stage, how easy is it, or how difficult is it to come away from that and get back to reality? Is it possible to do that, or is it always going to be
there? Yeah, I think a big problem that we have, especially with stigma, with specifically with psychotic disorder, is that there is this idea that is a lifelong sentence. So then when you've been diagnosed, okay, that's it, my life is over.
Yeah.
But actually it's not like that. And this is what I studied in my master's, which was called early intervention in psychosis, because they were what I learned is that basically it's important to intervene early. So that's kind of the key. Obviously with psychosis, the longer the duration of the untreated symptoms, the harder it is. So basically the more you go away from your normal baseline, the harder it is to recover.
Okay.
This doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. Yeah. It just every time you have a relapse, for example, you have a further cognitive decline.
Okay.
So again, it's possible, but the best thing would be, as soon as somebody has a psychotic episode or psychotic symptoms, would be obviously to get in touch with the early intervention practices. And when you do it there and then, for many people, it can then be a one-off event, and they can recover, and it doesn't mean that it has to happen again.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, like, for me, adverts or, like, things you hear on the radio or things you might see, sometimes you can be like, oh, that's a sign, like, you know.
Yeah.
Now, that's where the cross-reference could be, though, because you take it as a sign, maybe in a good thing, or, something that's going on in your life which is relatable to that. But obviously someone who's going through psychotic disorders, it's obviously taken it extremely personal, and actually, believing that, all right, it's not a sign, it's actually telling me, like, that's correct. Yeah.
Sounds like their reality changes.
Yeah.
That's where it kind of sounds like. It's like, reality is all. If you believe the reality you're in, which we all do, like most of the time, then you can see why someone in that state would probably act the way they would, which is, I find that quite scary, to be honest with you. I've had family members that have had schizophrenia, and it's like, don't get me wrong, it's like it's never really the same since they had it, sort of thing. But it's just quite scary that your reality could change in something that's, I feel, from what you said, it can change quickly. It can be one event that can make something switch, and it'll be, I guess, that stressful to put someone in that circumstance. So kind of gives you more of an insight, and I guess more compassion for people suffering from that as well. Obviously having compassion for them already. But compared to, I know you said that some people can recover. I was in the mindset that people never really recovered from psychosis majority of the time. So that's quite interesting for me to know. Would you say it's pretty would you say it's pretty even in terms of like people recovering or people not recovering, or is it more weighted to one direction?
Is it more about how early you catch it?
Yeah. But then again, I mean, in the services, when I was working in the crisis team, I usually, when we work with people that had a psychotic episode or relapse, then we don't leave them until they are somewhat recovered, and then we would discharge them to more specialized services, so they are followed by professionals. So obviously, you don't stay in that acute stage forever. So you're not having delusions and hallucinations constantly per se, because if you get antipsychotics, what they do is they basically bind to the receptors and then the dopamine receptor. And so even if you have this increased dopaminergic transmission, the dopamine doesn't bind. So the signal is not relayed. So
kind of dampens it in a sense. Yeah.
Obviously, it's not going back to how it was before, like 100%, as you said. But there is a high chance of recovery. I mean, I think it's important to get that message out there, because I've realized when I was studying it, my whole training was based on this, like really fight the stigma and like make people understand that they don't have to be disheartened. Like obviously, you wouldn't wish it on anybody, of course, and your life is going to change, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to do things anymore. You have to adapt. Obviously, it is quite quite different after, but
better to try and gain some kind of control in it than to not have any control at all. Because I mean, for me, it's always been mind-boggling sometimes when you see someone who would, like, let's say, walking down the street and they just like talking to themselves or just constantly, and you think, and I'm sure it crossed a lot of people's minds, like how, not that it's like what, like I'm sure it's many different experiences, many different routes, but how does one person get to that, and how do you get out of that? Because when you see people like that, it seems like they're quite far gone in that sense, and it's just like, but it's good to like I said, it was I thought before that there wasn't really any way you could come out of that, so I think that's a good message to put out to people as well, that definitely there are I guess medication and there's specific therapy set up for that, and that's good to know. But one question I had as well, which, because you mentioned the receptors and them being damp in that sense, so I actually took citraplan when I was younger, and that, from my understanding, that's what that does for anxiety, where obviously I'm imagining it's different receptors. But for me, I didn't, this is a bit off what we spoke about, but I didn't really have the best experience taking that medication, so I just wondered what are the positives of medications that dampen your receptors, and are there any negatives at all?
Yeah, there are a lot of negatives, and the problem is that medication, obviously you get a lot of side effects, and this is the main driver of relapses, because ideally, to kind of stay in the stable phase when you're feeling a bit better and your symptoms don't get the best of you, you would have to kind of stay on medication. It depends obviously on the circumstance. Let's say with psychosis that is a bit more extreme as a presentation, but you would have to take your medication, be compliant with that, be in touch with your community team, do talking therapies and things like that. However, the vast majority of the people, they stop taking medication at some point, because as you said, you have a lot of downsides to that. And specifically, like, they can make you gain weight, a lot of weight, or lose a lot of weight. They can make you really like dampen your creativity. So a lot of people, they just feel like they're going through life and they're like ghosts. You don't feel your emotions. They can be too strong in that sense. So Unfortunately, yeah, there is this
I
downside.
felt spacey when I took
Yeah.
it, like that, like spacey, and it's
You
like,
don't feel connected to
yeah,
yourself.
it was quite weird. It was quite weird, and that's why I stopped taking them in the end. But I mean, don't get me wrong, like in between that period, there were some plus sides of that as well. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't take it or anything.
Yeah.
Like that's just my experience. But that good to know that, as that interests me quite a bit.
I think it depends on your presentation as well. Obviously, with anxiety and depression, I'd say when you are at your kind of lowest point, they're always good to kind of help you get going for a while until you kind of build yourself up with the help of the talking therapies, and then it's okay to just once you feel better,
fizzle it out sort of thing.
Maybe with psychosis is a bit different because what they do, obviously, by blocking the dopamine receptors, they kind of, when they work, they take away the positive symptoms, so, or they make it like much more manageable, so like less delusion, less hallucination, so you kind of need it in that sense. And if you stop, that's what drives the relapse, because they come back and
no, 100%. I think in the psychosis side of things, of course, it's much more extreme, isn't it? And with the medication, I was offered the same as Dom, but I didn't take it for the reason that you said there, because obviously you can get a bit too used to them at times, and eventually you do have to come off them. That was just my opinion, but as we always say anyway, guys, if you are advised to take them when you are in critical stages, there's nothing wrong with that, and listen to your GP. If they advise you to take them, then our advice is do it. Definitely. So what I want to say, so did you complete your masters? Yeah, all done. Congratulations.
Thank you. I actually
obviously, because you're very intelligent explaining that, and you know
there were a couple of words I didn't know what they meant, to be honest.
Just if I say something.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you when you were speaking.
Yeah, no, we're not degree educated. So it's really interesting to actually learn about that and the receptors and things, because it's something that, as you see, when you do see people walking, you think, what is actually going on inside the brain, So it's really insightful. So thank you for that. When you was working in a crisis team, what age did you start working for that team? How old was you? Yeah,
I was just last year, so I was 24.
Okay, and before that, when was your earliest year of starting in mental health sector?
No, that's where
that's where you started. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because we've spoken to people who've started a little bit younger as well.
18.
18. Yeah.
And it was like on their first day, they were in, I think, more of a residential unit, and it was like they said that they got there and the person left before them. They were like, there you go, we've not really any training. And don't get me wrong, like the best way you learn anything is by doing it, but obviously in that scenario it's a little bit different from other things. You'd think there'd be some preparation, but even at 24, I think, especially in a circumstance where you're caring for people and there's people that are older than you, sometimes it's like managing someone that's younger than you. Sometimes it can be a little bit at its own challenges from that, even outside of that circumstance. So I mean, when you first started doing that, I mean, first week, what were your feelings about it as a whole?
I was excited. I was scared because the thing is, I'd been studying it for a long time, but it's really different, going from the textbook to the actual thing. So in my head, I have everything prepared. It's like, okay, if this happens, I'm gonna act like this, and that. But reality is different. Like I remember the first day when I started at the crisis team. I was expecting, obviously I had my training, but I was expecting to, start it easy and just, being in the office, being explained things. And actually, I mean, this happened, but then on the same day, we went on the first house visit. Because obviously what you do there is you visit people in their homes, so least restrictive environment, and you help them in their home so they feel more comfortable. And so on the first day on the job, I went there and we went to this house of this lovely elderly lady, and she was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. And it was quite interesting because basically she had this thing that obviously feeling paranoid, she would lock every door behind you. And they were telling me that the day before, when other colleagues went, she locked one of them inside, so he had to go out from the window.
Oh, wow.
And obviously the reasoning behind it is that if you're being paranoid, you don't trust anyone, even
Sure.
if you're a mental health professional, and ideally you go there to help. You know, if you're having paranoia, obviously you
doesn't really change anything. Yeah.
So yeah, that's what happened the first day. She was locking us in, and then I was sitting right next to her, and I was feeling
On edge.
yes.
Yeah.
But that's just because obviously I didn't have an experience. So I was just thinking in my head, okay, what do I say to make her feel better, to make her feel comfortable? So it was a lot in my head, but then obviously it gets easier with experience.
With time.
How was your relationship with that woman after a time? Did it grow?
Yeah, of course. Unfortunately, being in the crisis team, you see people, but it's really while they're in their acute state.
Okay.
So it's a little bit harder to maybe
build a relationship.
Yeah, and also you don't see them for that long, because ideally the crisis intervention goes from like 1 week to 2 weeks, and it can be extended, but generally, so you don't see them that long.
Yeah.
But I obviously I could read their notes because we have the system. So with some of them, I would make sure and check like how they're doing now. They're maybe.
Okay, right, yeah. You can see what.
Yeah, you can see them.
Nice, okay,
obviously, we wouldn't have discharged them if they weren't
ready.
Yeah, well enough to then. Obviously, from the crisis team, usually we wouldn't just discharge them. Sometimes they would go maybe into hospital where they can have more, even more support, or simply to a specialized team where they can have therapists and doctors looking after them long term.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I didn't have that long time with each patient. But yeah.
Yeah, it's nice that you can still check up and see how they're getting on in the future by the notes and things, obviously on the system, which is good. So that was your first experience there, which I think would put anyone on edge. So well done anyway for doing it. And yeah, it must be completely different from textbook to practical, and actually being in there, because learning about the mind and things, but seeing it on specific characters of people, because I'm guessing different people have different behavior patterns when they have psychosis, right? So in terms of that, was there many common behavior patterns that you've seen?
I'd say, the most prevalent and most common is paranoia.
Okay.
So paranoid schizophrenia. Even research has showed that almost 50% of people with psychosis have that type of delusion.
Right.
So yeah, that was the most common, like literally almost every person. And usually they would think that somebody close to them was there to hurt them. So many times were neighbors.
Right.
So for example, there was this other lady that had this problem with her back door, and it was really old door basically, and it kept breaking. So she was fixing it, but then it kept breaking, and her way of interpreting that situation was, oh, this is my neighbors, they're trying to break into my house, and they keep doing it over and over.
Yeah.
And then when we were speaking with the daughter, she was saying it's a really old door, it's rotten, we don't have enough money to change it, so that's why every time it rains it gets broken. But obviously for somebody with paranoia, you would find the evidence, you create narratives that always confirm your hypothesis. So this type of situation was happening quite a lot with neighbors and family members, and that was the most common, I'd say.
Yeah, no, I from me, I can totally understand why they would see that as well, because it's like, it's very repetitive if someone's doing that constantly. So, once they get that thought once, that's always there for them to see, for it to come back into their mind. So, of course, not everyone's in a position to fix things. And obviously, sometimes you might not know what your neighbours, have going on.
You always have to give people benefit of the doubt as well. Like, you need to kind of double check things. Obviously, sometimes it would be like really bizarre. So and really unlikely. Yeah. So you kind of can tell already, but it is. You also need to.
You can't just say no. I don't believe you straight away.
Obviously. Ideally, it could be something that it could happen.
Yeah, it could happen.
You never know. Some people don't have very good relationship with the neighbors. You don't.
Imagine that. Imagine it was like just someone normal. Like, no, someone is trying to break in, and they're like, no, I think you're paranoid. It's like, No.
An interesting thing.
It's got a
actually.
balaclava on.
Literally, but it's like I think it just shows you how like if you are in that state of mind, how the simplest of things can be massive issues in your life. Because like a door breaking for most of us would be not a big issue, but like and not even like not being able to fix it, that's an issue in itself as well. Do you know what I mean? That, like on a wider basis, but that's one thing. But it's like having that mindset and believing that every time, like just that's no way to live as well. Like being paranoid like that on edge all the time it must be horrible. And it's like for me, it's quite interesting to know that 50% of psychosis. So why do you think it's so high with that particular type of psychosis?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I researched this for a while. I even published a paper on paranoids, like delusions, recently, and I wouldn't know. It's just something that really like happens. I think just paranoia is very common. Like
there's a lot of fear in the world though. I think like a lot of like the news. I think scaremongers a lot of people. Like obviously there's a lot around. Like look at what we got at the moment, right? Food shortage, energy shortage, whatever. So I think I think a lot of people. You can kind of look in people's faces sometimes and just normally see like I think some like on a wider basis people on a kind of on edge a lot of time. Just because there are a lot of unsureties. So
I also think the fact that obviously when you're experiencing this type of crisis you feel very vulnerable, so is a way of it's hard to explain, but how you would you feel vulnerable within yourself, so you're quite scared, isn't it, of the world. So it's really stems from like your core beliefs that you have since you were a child, and basically your beliefs about people and the world. And obviously when you're at this kind of crisis point and feeling so vulnerable, it makes sense that you would feel like the world is unsafe. People are, dangerous and scary. That's kind of a recurring theme as well. So I think also that's why that kind of then translates into paranoia, because you don't feel safe within yourself, and then it comes out in the way in which you see everything as well.
Yeah, we build our reality from the inside out, really. So that does make sense. And outside of paranoia, what would you say the next most prevalent psychosis is that people tend to suffer from?
I mean, it's really in terms of the types of delusion that they experience. So there are different types, where there are grandiose delusions. So that's kind of that's different. That's when you have kind of the God complex. So you feel like it's like self-inflating basically, and you feel like you're powerful and you can do anything, which is actually I mean it's kind of on the other extreme. But that's quite dangerous as well, because if you have grandiose delusion, for example, you might believe, oh, I can fly. And so there have been situations in which we had some people that they were thinking that, and to just prove it, or because they were a bit in kind of a manic state, they would jump off a building, because in their heads they're believing, oh, I can survive this, I can fly. And then obviously
because that's what they would always say when they would talk about like psychedelics and stuff. They would say people I guess in like the traditional like propaganda warning of not doing it. They'll see. I remember like seeing adverts on TV where it's like don't do drugs, and people would like jump off roofs and stuff like that. So it's crazy, but that is probably right in the sense that people could get psychosis from that and be thinking like that. But that is quite. It's quite a weird extreme to have though, isn't it? Like to think like to be. It's just for me, I can't get over like 1 minute you can be in a certain mindset and then it just changes so quickly. But
obviously it's a process, and you have different stages. So there's like the phase in childhood where you have some kind of cognitive or motor deficits that go unnoticed probably.
What does that mean?
Just like as a child you might move a bit different, like in terms of your motor skills or cognitive. So like
stuff like
patterns.
dyslexia, dyspraxia, like that sort of thing. Or
I wouldn't go as far as like associating the things because obviously I don't think. I mean, I'm not sure whether there's been found an association between, but yeah, kind of. So like there is some kind of cognitive problems when you are a child, and then just in the way in which maybe you think it's a little bit different, and then you go on to the premorbid stage, which is what I was mentioning before. So when you start feeling like everything is different, like you see the world differently, and that's kind of just before you get the acute phase of the disorder. So obviously it's kind of a process, and also it depends on a range of different factors, how they interplay, how many stressors you had, the trauma, and all your experiences.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, isn't there?
But it changes a lot.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's sad. It is a sad thing, obviously, and it's a really serious mental health issue. I think it's got to be up there top, with one of the top, isn't it? You know, it's sad, but obviously the work that you was doing in the crisis team and things, I take my hat off to you. It's really good work, and it's, you know, not everyone is built for that, especially when you're only with patients for a week or 2 weeks and you're having to meet someone new. So constantly, it's, you know, must be very fast paced for you as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, well done. Anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
One thing that did interest me about your background as well was I don't know if it's papers you wrote on stigma, and like how that, I think it was influences different like groups of people.
Yeah, I mean, throughout my training, I was like researching this in terms of stigma, and
it's it's quite a broad subject. So for you, what was, I guess, the most interesting thing that you found from your research in regards to stigma?
So I think that in terms of stigma, it's important to kind of divide and talk about the different types, because obviously there is public stigma. So it's the conception that the public, the general population has on mental illness, so the stereotypes.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's self-stigma. So that's when you apply those stereotypes to yourself and your condition if you're having mental health concerns. And then you have institutionalized stigma, so about the systemic, let's say, some policies that could be stigmatizing, for example, in the workplace, or things like that. And then there's affiliate stigma, which is when your family and people that are close to you have that stigma about the mental illness, and obviously that's quite bad for the people that are experiencing it. But yeah, so in terms of the stigma, it's really important. This was a central topic in my training, because obviously what it does is that it stops people from seeking help.
Sure.
And so basically they don't access services as early as it should have been done. And so, as we said before, it leads to longer untreated symptoms and worse prognosis and worse outcomes in general for recovery. And yeah, so I was reading a paper. So this was the Stigma Shout Survey. And what they showed that was quite interesting. Basically, they were looking at all the areas that are affected in the lives of people with mental health problems in terms of the stigma. And they were looking at experienced stigma versus anticipated stigma. So basically, most of the service users in UK, they were saying that they have experienced stigma in their workplace. Obviously, you know, through the employment, maybe when they were applying for jobs, or even once they were there by their colleagues and the bosses. And so that's pretty sad on its own. But then it also showed that they would anticipate stigma. For example, specifically in terms of disclosing their mental health issues. So they were anticipating that they would be stigmatized, basically, and judged. But actually what the survey showed is that they weren't the actual experienced stigma in that situation. It was less than the anticipated one. So it's a bit complicated concept, but the thing is, basically...
Why do you think that is, just to ask?
Because obviously in other areas, they do experience it, like in the employment sector. So I think it creates a kind of a vicious cycle. So because of the experienced stigma, I'm going to obviously anticipate that even in other areas of my life, I'm going to be judged and discriminated. And because of that, it's like, it's a circle. It kind of feeds into the whole thing.
You mention the anticipated stigma was higher, though?
Yeah.
But so why do you think it would be higher for the anticipated than what they've actually experienced?
No, well, they said that, so it was kind of.
Because you may experience one, but then you're anticipating in your
In
next.
other areas,
Yeah.
So obviously, it makes sense that in the variable of disclosing, you would anticipate because but probably it was less high because when you're disclosing to friends, to family. So maybe that's why they didn't experience stigma in that regard as much, because maybe they were disclosing to like people that were close to them and they loved them.
Sure.
But in general, what it was this study was showing is that all the areas of their life, in some way, one way or another, they were impacted by stigma.
Okay.
So even going out, doing any activity, going to the gym, they basically stigma would stop them from doing different things, trying new things, starting a new relationship, because of the fear of having to, tell the person, oh, I have this.
So just experience it in one area of their life. Then now, before they go into anything, that's coming up in their mind before they've even taken a step in the direction of what they want to do. I can get that. I think because I think I could be honest. I probably get that in some circumstances, but just not. I just don't resonate with it. So like it doesn't. I might get a thought like, oh, in any circumstance, there's a stigma there. But if you obviously don't, I guess, believe that, then the impact doesn't hit you. And I think that's a breakdown where a lot of people have. They always believe what they hear in their minds, and they don't make that gap in between. So but that's it's quite sad, isn't it? You think like how many people haven't like done things they want to do in their life because just of like the thought, and it comes from that word. What I said, like assuming, like you're assuming that something's gonna happen or people are gonna have that thought, which I think is a lot of the world that we're in at the moment as well. But
I've experienced that as well. Now the difference is for me is I've definitely experienced stigma now because I cross-reference that with more like anxiety for me, So does stigma and anxiety link together?
Yeah, and mental health.
Okay, yeah. Concern. So it makes sense then because like as you say, it stops you from doing things or going places, seeing people, relationships, anything like that. For me, it's never actually stopped me fully. I don't know because I'm not sure. I just always like want to see the outcome myself, So I'd rather go through it than not.
Yeah.
And not know what the actual outcome was, because I think that's quite important so you can tell yourself as well the answer, whether it was anticipation or it was actually stigma. But of course...
But still you have kind of the thought in your mind and it's kind of disturbing you in a way.
Definitely,
Because the thing I can relate to, though, like when I had really, really bad anxiety, there'd be scenarios where like I didn't even want to go to a coffee shop because I'd be in the queue and I'd just be like 100 miles an hour, and then it would get like I don't know, a bit too much. But I can only link that and say the stigma. I used to think like people were looking at me because I looked weird because I had anxiety. Do you know which sorry when you say it back like it's just because it's just like. But I'd think that, but it's just like I think it's just. I think just realising that some of these things are just not logical as well is a big thing. But at the same time, there is a load of stigma out there. It's like, I mean, stigma in the workplace. It's like, for example, I've spoken about my mental health at work. Like, I've had conversations with people, not really about it, but I've mentioned it and they said, oh, like, do you, like, what was wrong with you? Actually, some people have said, and I was like, which isn't the best way to put it, right? But I'll go into it, and it's kind of like people are more surprised when you speak about that. So I think there still is the stigma in the workplace that mental health is taboo. Because like when I've said that, on a job interview a couple of weeks ago, I said it, and they were quite surprised that when they delved into it, I actually had the conversation with them. And I think like speaking to people like yourself and speaking about this area of things, because we haven't really gone into detail on stigma yet from someone like yourself who's actually researched it. So for me, this is very, very beneficial, and obviously for everyone watching. But I mean, it makes me think like obviously we do Chaps Chat to try and break this, but like what would you say the other best ways are to break stigma?
I mean, it's a tough one. I guess more like generally thinking about what has been done so far by the services as well, would be to really advertise it in a way. So create mental health campaigns, which has been done. There are lots out there. So I would say one important thing would be to bring this in the classrooms. So with young children, would be nice to talk about this, let them know that, from a young age, as well as in the workplaces. I know like a lot of companies now, especially in London, they really keeping up with these things. They do mental health workshops. They have HR looking after the mental health of the employees.
Got well-being. We got well-being.
Yeah.
Where we are at the moment, and you get a lot of trainings now that come around and do it. But I got to be honest, the trainings I didn't like. When I say training, I mean like not like a virtual training, not like someone. I think someone there speaking to you about it would be good. But for me, I never like the virtual training. It's more like you're trying. You got work to do. You're trying to like even me. Where I'm passionate about it. I was trying to get to the end of it. So
that's true.
No, honestly, it's like anything that if you ever get sent something in work to your desktop.
Yeah.
Any sort of training they give you, it's like, yeah. You know what I mean?
No,
Quickly,
true.
yeah.
The delivery should be changed.
100%.
Actually, what you were mentioning, having magari maybe like a service user or somebody like coming there and talking about their experience, and that would be like really beneficial. Actually, yeah.
That'd be a good idea for us, isn't it?
That would be,
yeah. Let's see what happens.
We'll cut that bit out.
Great, actually.
Yeah, no, it would.
You know what, workplace, speaking of just quickly on the workplace, where I work now is probably one of the first companies where I've explained about my mental health journey as well. And they're currently in the process of bringing in a mental health program, which is really good, really happy about. That was on my first induction, they told me about that, so I was like quite impressed about that. And, you know, my boss currently is very on the level as well and understands about mental health, which I can appreciate. So he sort of knows my background as well. And I think that's really important in a workplace. As you said, like on your interview, being open about it makes things a lot easier. People can understand your situations and can notice when things are going bad for you, or you might be having a really, bad time at that moment. Someone might approach you who's at a higher level to be able to identify, okay, like he's already told me he's got anxiety or suffered with depression before. Let's actually look into this and take it a step further. And I think that's how it should be with every company.
Yeah, definitely. I think because I work in sales as well, so it's probably traditionally the industry where it hasn't been so prevalent. But like it is changing. That's it. Obviously, I say that because it's my view that it's changing. Obviously, I'm sure there's a lot of scenarios where it's probably not changing at all in the workplace. But it's definitely good that people are starting to be more open to that. Does always worry me from the corporate side though. I think like are they just doing this like for more of how things look?
Because that one is. They're just following suit. Some people.
Yeah, that's it. But obviously, you can't really have that perspective, can you? Right, you got to kind of think the best in people sometimes. I can imagine.
No, but you're right. I see where you're coming from. Yeah,
it's just like even like diversity inclusion's a big thing. We get a couple of those like checklists come around and stuff like that. It's more. That's what it seems like. I think a lot of time, like it's a checklist for people. In most circumstances, I've been in, or companies, it's probably better to say than people. But I think like obviously, even if it is that. In a sense, that's still going to have more of a positive effect than there not being any at all. So you got to kind of take the positives.
I have to say though, I feel like in UK we are so on this. So like I'm glad that at least this type of policies exist, because if I think back, I mean in Italy where I'm originally from, I mean I never really worked there because obviously I arrived here, I was very young. But from what I hear and how I know how things are there, and it's not like this. No. So I feel like we are. On the right path, at least,
And how does it, just to ask, how does, I guess, I'll say like, it's quite a broad question, right? But the state of mental health, let's say, in the UK compared to Italy?
So as I said, I haven't really experienced it there because I came here when I was very young. But I mean, my auntie, she's been a nurse for all her life. So based on what she told me as well, what's quite sad is that like the psychiatric units there, that's kind of the places where many nurses go to like retire, because there is this conception where it's like an end of career stage. You go there because it's easier, because patients are really like sedated and they just leave them there. Like obviously I don't want to like generalize also, because I don't actually know what goes on there, but from what I've heard, there's no, like, the conception is very different, and there is a lot of stigma, especially, I mean, I'm from the north, but I know that in the south as well of Italy, there is kind of this culture throughout all Italy, to be honest, of like not really talking about it as much. So there is like much more stigma.
No, that's I think that obviously gives us a good perspective of like what we do have here, and obviously there's that you can look at anything like there needs to be improvements, but from what you said, obviously we should be quite happy about like what we a lot of the stuff that we get here.
I think when comparing the two, yeah.
I mean, it's all, you can always think in life it could always be worse, right? So like you got to kind of take comfort in that. I think a little bit.
I think what it is, sorry mate, I think as well is like because the problem here is not enough people are speaking up about their mental health issues. Yeah, this is what we're trying to do to make it more common to do so. And I think once you do refer yourself or you've been referred and you're actually in the mental health program or going through therapy and things, you start to realise that the UK do a lot. Like the NHS are there to help, right? That's something that we've never said is like they don't do enough help. It's more about people speaking up about it. So for people who haven't been referred or have gone through it, that's a stigma for them as well, to not know what's on the other side and not know what help that they can receive.
Misinformation and not knowing.
Exactly, 100%. And it's really important to get the message out there, and that's why we have people like yourselves on, who have worked within the mental health sector to be able to explain to people, this is the work that we do, and these are the different types of mental health issues we've dealt with, or just people in general, to make it more normal to be able to do that and find the courage and speak up about it.
And
I agree. Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No. I was just about to say I was actually quite impressed when I was going through my training, like the way they teach us, and it really, they teach you obviously to look at people not from their mental health, like. It's not all about having that disorder. It's about treating people holistically, helping them in all the areas of their life. So I was very impressed coming from Italy, seeing the type of training that they do here to mental health professionals. Like they really do teach you to, be compassionate and empathic and really care about the people. So that kind of gives a lot of hope that, especially, generations that are being trained now, we've been equipped with these kind of things basically. So it's really good.
That's really good. That's another good thing for the viewers as well. Anyone who wants to get into the mental health career side of things, that the support is there and the correct training's there. Oh yeah, that's great. Whereabouts in Italy are you from? Padua.
It's quite close to Venice.
Oh yeah, okay.
Usually I say that because nobody really knows what it is. So it's like, Venice.
Just to the right or something.
Just to the right.
No, to be fair, I don't think I've heard of that city before. Padua.
Yes.
Okay, at least I'm saying it right anyway. That's the main thing. But what I was going to ask finally was, I think for me, obviously I wrote the question, but it resonated with me because in the pandemic, I had the worst anxiety I've ever had. Well, that's only probably the first time I noticed that was anxiety. And it, like, for me sitting here now and, like, not really, well, barely suffering it from at all in any circumstances to what it was before, which obviously I gave a little bit of earlier, like the cafe scenario. It's just absolutely crazy. Like, I can't see how I could get from here to there, but I know you said that, I don't know if it was anxiety, but in the pandemic you suffered a little bit yourself from mental health issues. So was it anxiety that you suffered with, or? Yeah,
so generally I've always been a very anxious person. That's just part of my personality.
Sure.
But yeah, basically it was mainly related to COVID. So I got COVID in January 2019, I think it was, and then went through it. I thought I was fine, and then 1 month after is when I started my postgraduate diploma. So I started working in the NHS.
Sure.
And obviously before I was in furlough, so I wasn't really doing anything at home. I was resting, so I thought I was okay. And then when I started the job, which was per se very, very stressful and emotionally draining, I started to realize, okay, I don't feel okay in my body. So I was having fatigue, like really serious fatigue, and cognitive symptoms, so like brain fog. I could just see my brain working a little slower than it used to.
Sure.
So now I know that was kind of long COVID, but at the time it was just at the very beginning. So obviously I was doing this new training, which was really demanding. Plus I wasn't feeling okay physically, and that obviously took a toll on my mental health as well.
Sure.
Because so I was feeling anxious, obviously not knowing. At the time, COVID was still this really unknown thing. Nobody knew what were the consequences in lockdown. So I was really anxious about what's going to happen to me in the future, what are going to be the consequences of feeling like this. And also was experiencing low moods, to be honest, because I was obviously 24, so very young, and feeling that my body just felt different, basically. So, I went through it, to be honest. It was hard to also work within the mental health at that point, because I was trying to support people and help them, when I could also relate in a way, when I was talking to the person trying to help them, obviously being professional, doing everything by protocol and do everything right, but inside me I was feeling, oh, I understand, I'm feeling that as well. So it was hard, but I thought it would be worth mentioning, just in case if somebody else is going through that, because when I was in the middle of it, I was so scared, and I would just like to basically relay the message that it does get better, and it's very important. I mean, what helped me was obviously it sounds cliche, but really improving the lifestyle, so exercising and also nutrition. There's actually like a lot of research about the gut-brain axis. I don't know if you heard about that. Like lately it's become like
they call it the second brain, don't they?
Yes, the second brain, exactly. So it looks like we have a lot of receptors, like serotonin receptors in the gut, and serotonin is the happiness neurotransmitter. So obviously what we put into the gut feeds our microbiome, and it's really, really important, and it's directly connected to the brain. So although it sounds cliche, eat healthy, it really
it makes a difference. Made a massive difference to me, and it's like, cause that's the other cliche people say is you are what you eat, and it's like, but it's like for me, I can resonate on that, because I had like, it wasn't just health anxiety, but that was a big part of what I had. It was like, because I would get heart palpitation. I actually took myself to the hospital thinking I was having a heart attack or something. But it's like, sometimes it can be the simplest things that shifts you, because what I actually did was bought a watch that had an ECG on it. So anytime I would feel like I can get heart palpitations, I would just do that, and I would see, well, there's nothing actually wrong with you, and then that would put me at ease. And then don't get me wrong, not straight away it would just get rid of it, but over time that made a difference. But it's not nice to feel like there's, obviously I didn't have long COVID or anything, but I've spoke with people that have had brain fog, and I do recruitment. I had people interview for me who had brain fog, and they come out of the interview and they just be like, I'm really sorry, but I just completely blanked. And I can imagine that would be quite worrying in that circumstance, when there's no actual background on how that virus affected anyone at that point. So like that your mind would run around in that anyway. I would think so. But I appreciate you running through that with us, because I think obviously me and Ollie both suffer from anxiety. So, and that tends to be one of the most prevalent mental health I think our viewers have. So that's going to be really useful information for them.
Just on that as well, what you're saying about feeling inside and having to do your job on the outside. And it's really difficult, isn't it?
Horrible,
it's
isn't
like
it, really?
you're really actually putting on a brave face. And it's like, it's extremely difficult. I remember I was in work one time, same thing as Dom. I had to go to hospital. I thought I was having a heart attack, heart palpitation. And I was sitting at my desk, and like, people are talking to me, asking me questions, and I'm, but inside I'm screaming. I'm like, I need to get out of it now. Like,
it's horrible.
Like, I could be mid-conversation with someone talking about a boiler. I was in plumbing. That's how I'm gonna pass away. It's not really what I want to be doing.
Honestly.
It's not nice, but how are you feeling now with the anxiety? Everything okay?
It is getting better. As I said, it's a process. I think I just got used to it, to like a new way of life. With this kind of long COVID, it goes like up and down. So I've been better for a few months. Lately, I'm feeling a little bit, in terms of the brain fog and fatigue, it's coming back a little bit, but it's okay. I'm keeping a positive mindset. I know now there's more research about it as well, and I know that it does get better. So it's just about.
I was going to say, well, your answers and how you spoke today has been absolutely brilliant. So it's me and him asking what the words mean. So
it's been great. It's been really good, and just with that as well, we're always here to chat if you ever need a chat when you're feeling down or not feeling good.
Thank you.
So
Appreciate it. Thank you,
you're
guys.
welcome. No problem.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that's it from our side. Just to ask, is there any questions you have for us?
Oh gosh.
I know I put it on you a little bit. I didn't ask you. Just thought we never usually ask that at the end, but I just thought I might ask it this
It's
time.
okay if you don't.
Yeah,
Don't
if you
worry.
don't. If not, it's cool.
The thing is with this question, it might be like too broad.
Oh shoot.
But I was just wondering, like, what were like the techniques and like the tools that you guys have used to then go from, you know, feeling anxiety to the point where I can't even go to the coffee shop to then now managing so well.
Cool. So with me, so the CBT, that was definitely a main player. Just getting that understanding of my brain and understanding how my body works and like the process of anxiety. And then I'm like, with my lifestyle, it made sense why I kept thinking like I was having my heart palpitations and stuff like that, whatever. But equal to that, meditation. So I started meditating at that point, and that's probably been the biggest game changer for me, I think, because that teaches you to be present, and also that led me on to like deepening like spiritual practice and looking into that side of things. And then like it's how I mentioned earlier, people need to separate themselves from their minds. I literally every episode we do, I go on about this. Like you can look back through all of them. I've probably said the same thing, but it's just like that getting that separation and not resonating with your thoughts or having the choice to. Makes such a difference because I like at any point where in life, right? So if I walk down the street, if I'm on my own, I'm trying to be present. So I'm trying to walk with clearness of mind without actually thinking thoughts unless I have to. And like having that ability I would have never been able to do that before. But over time, just kind of taking that little step forward in that respect, which started with meditation because that's being, I guess, most present and prolonging that gap of thought. Was probably the main two differences for me. But then there are obviously other things like the exercise, the food you're eating. Also, to be honest, I was in my room's in like a tiny little loft conversion, and I was in there working for the whole of COVID for like a year and a bit. I've been someone traditionally always works in an office 5 days a week. So what I actually realised when I went back to the office, even part-time, half time, that was a big thing. But I wasn't alone in my house. Like there was I lived with my granddad. He was there in the day, right? But I'm upstairs, and being in this room, I think all that time, I didn't realise how like almost I think I don't know if it's the right word, like compartmentalised my mind had become. Whereas like I'd been in that room so much that was making my anxiety high, not for even like a specific reason I could tell you, but just I think just having that experience. And when I went back into the office alongside doing these other things, that kind of started to break down, and I sort of like. And it was a little bit difficult going back and being around people then because I still had the anxiety, but over time it just it's almost disappeared, to be honest with you. Like I couldn't tell you the last time that I really experienced it, to be honest. Like which is weird.
You learn,
but you're never don't get me wrong, it's a constant thing of like doing the things that give you that quality of life. Like it's not a thing you can just do it for a bit and stop, from my point of view anyway. But consistently meditating, consistently like training, eating a bit better, not all the time, but as much as I can, has just made a big difference. Yeah, and plus it just makes you like I just feel more joyous in life in general than I did before, which is great. Do you know what I mean?
I'm glad to hear.
Oh, thanks.
What about you, Ali?
For me, to be honest, with anxiety, a lot of my anxiety was resonated with health anxiety, so like the heart palpitations or thinking there was something wrong with my body. So for heart palpitations, breathing exercises, I still do it to this day because I still get the heart palpitations.
Yeah.
Breathing exercises crucially important for me. I think when I feel that sense of anxiety coming on, I just need to take a breath and actually stop and just relax and chill. And whilst doing the breathing exercises, it's almost like having a mini conversation with my mind to be like, you need to slow it down, like just take a step back. And I think like talking to yourself, you could do it out loud if you want, or in your own head. You know, not like walking down the street and like that. But yeah, just as I'm breathing, just to focus on my breathing to let me know everything's all right, and that, you know, it's not, nothing's gonna happen. It's not actually that bad. The second thing for me in like the social anxiety terms of things, I know it's not for everyone, but for me was just putting myself in that situation to find out the answer for myself. And it was tough. It's very difficult doing that because you know. Yeah, it's hard. It's very hard to do it. But I learned once I'd done it a couple times that things started to get better.
That's the best, is kind of treating yourself by exposure. That's the best thing you could do.
Yeah, it's like you just got to throw yourself in the deep end. Like for me, I had to anyway, because it's not the way that I wanted to be living. You know, I like being a sociable person and things. So for me, I just had to put myself in there. And also just remember that, you know, people are going to judge regardless. And, you know, everyone does at some points in their life, and that's fine. That's all right. But you are you. And people should just like you for you. If people don't like you for you, there's not a lot you can do about that. And that's just the way the world goes around. So, you know, I've just sort of got to grips on that. And
as long as you like you, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
That's what's gonna keep you sane. You know what I mean?
That's it.
Really and truthfully. But it's like, well, I think that one thing that always like I kind of like look back in hindsight, it makes me like chuckle a little bit about anxiety. Is like we think so much about what other people are thinking of us when we have anxiety, but the realisation is most of the time those people aren't thinking.
Care.
They're probably in their mind thinking
the same, maybe.
That's why the energy's so off sometimes, because you're thinking this person don't like me, they're thinking the same, but really
they're all trying to run away from each other, isn't it? Nah, it's funny, but I think like definitely like being able to have that conversation or even have that or make that observation definitely shows that we've all made some process in our kind of like, I'm not going to call it a battle, but kind of beating anxiety. That's probably a good way to put it. But yeah, it's I probably see that most on the train. It's like it's hard to keep like to look at someone who's sitting straight in front of you anymore. I don't think people like it too much. Like they'd rather sit on their phones and stuff like that. But I suppose having that out of having your phone probably makes it worse because you can just sit there and look at your phone. But yeah, I actually was on the train the other day. I was on the way back from work. I just started having a random conversation with someone because I was like, it was quite funny. I'd had a couple of beers, to be honest with you.
That's lovely when that happens, though.
I was just getting this energy, right? And I was like I should have this conversation. I was like no one really chats to each other on the trains no more. Like that kind of convo. And it played out, right? That this guy had a conversation about mindfulness. He just before he's getting off, he's like, oh, you should read this book. It's just good. It'd be great for you to read. I unzipped my bag. I had the same book in my bag that he was already telling me. And it's things like that. If I need to chat to someone on the train again, I will. You got to put yourself in that scenario. But things like that just make me think, it was good to have that convo and little.
That
things
was
like
meant to happen.
Yeah. Well, I'll just carry around a load of books with me, just so I've got the right one.
Just in case.
Nah, but it was funny though, to be honest with you. But yeah, well, thanks for the question. It's definitely a good one. Yeah, I had to think a little bit about what helped me, but it's always good to think back and think about all the tools, because sometimes it's like anything, we can be guilty of forgetting to do some of the things that have worked for us. So it's definitely beneficial. But yeah, well, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, guys.
It's been great to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
And just to say, the work you're doing and obviously I'm going to keep doing is amazing. I think just the information you've been able to give us is amazing because it's been quite technical inside of how the brain works, and I think that's been one of the areas that's benefited me the most in terms of learning how your things actually work. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, guys. This has been Chaps Chat with me, Dom.
Me, Ollie.
And our friend Giorgia. But until next time.